Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. This hour we start in the United States, which is set to impose a 25% tariff on Indian imports starting on August the 1st. US President Donald Trump made the announcement on his social media platform Truth Social. He cited India's high tariffs, strict non-monetary trade barriers and its continued military and energy ties with Russia. Trump called India a friend, but said these barriers have limited US-India trade for years. A separate, unspecified penalty is also expected to be imposed. We're now joined by Jajit Bhattacharya. He is an economist and finance expert. He joins us live here on the program. Jajit, thank you very much for joining us on the program. This is a new announcement about half an hour ago on Donald Trump's Truth Social platform. Can you walk us through the nature of this new 25% tariff the United States plans to impose on Indian goods on August the 1st? Who will it affect the most?
Is that a question to me?
Yes, Jajit, thank you very much.
No, absolutely. So it's really going to hurt India. A significant amount of India's exports go to US. In fact, US is the largest export market for India. There's a whole bunch of goods that's exported to the US, starting with electronics. There is coffee, tobacco, gems, jewelry, jute, and so on and so forth. Now, there are multiple other nations which can export the very same things to the US, starting with China exporting electronic goods. So with a 20 to 25% tariff being imposed on India, Indian exports will get significantly displaced from the US market. So it is clearly a big hit for India. Now, if you look at the other way around in terms of what India imports from US, which includes aircrafts and aircraft parts, that is really not substitutable. If somebody is buying from Boeing, they will continue to buy from Boeing because it's an ecosystem purchase decision. So the impact of this will be larger on India, will be lower on US, but the US will also get hit. And things like medicines and pharmaceuticals will go up in the US. So obviously the pain will be on both sides, but there will be greater pain for India.
Jajit, Donald Trump on his Truth Social platform has said that India has some of the highest tariffs in the world and that calls them strenuous and obnoxious non-monetary trade barriers of any country. Can you analyze that bit for us? Donald Trump certainly has a way of speaking, but is this an accurate way of depicting India's trade?
No, not really. There are tariffs which are on the slightly higher side, but we are not the ones which are the highest or one of the higher ones by any stretch of imagination. These are tariffs which have been agreed upon after the GATT, the GATT round that happened. The high tariffs are only on sectors which we need to protect, such as agriculture, which is something that even US does and Europe does. Everybody needs to protect their agricultural sector, and we do the same. Automobiles is another sector where, because India started late, the Indian government had to give some protection to the automobile sector. And therefore, those one-off tariffs are looked at and they're taken out of context to show or to say that India has got very high tariff rates. In general, that's not really a correct view of the rates in India. The Indian rates are not extremely high. They are reasonable when you compare to, let's say, Brazil or even China and so on. So India really would not be does not fall in the highest category. Bangladesh has got much higher. China has got higher. In fact, the average rate for China is 34%, and India's the average rate is only about 26%. So India is not really the highest tariff nation the way Trump had put in.
Jajit, we've seen the words trade war appear quite frequently with the words tariff in regards to this saga. Do you think that India could retaliate to this 25% tariff? If so, what leverage does it have to do so?
Well, I mean, India is still importing a significant amount of farm goods and farm produces from the US. My guess will be that just like many other countries that retaliated on the farm sector with US because in a democracy, farmers are an important component, and therefore, if the farmers get hit, then that leads to a change in policy. And perhaps India will be looking at the farm goods that we import and put a tariff on those goods. Also, once you put a tariff on those goods, it also impacts India because the cost goes up. But any tariff that is put in does hurt both countries. Same is the case from US, and same is the perspective from India. But my guess really is that the tariffs will be on agricultural products to begin with.
Yeah, let's dive a little bit deeper into these certain sectors that are going to be affected the most. Which sectors of these Indian exports do you expect to be hardest hit by the 25% tariff? Are we primarily looking at agricultural, pharmaceuticals, textiles, copper, or something broader here?
No, these are exactly the sectors that you're talking about, which is, pharmaceutical is going to get hit majorly. US is a large market for the pharma sector. Same with electronics. US was continues to be a large sector for electronics. And look, copper is substitutable. There's a lot of Latin American countries which are exporting copper to US. But the manufactured goods are really the sector which will take a hit. However, do keep in mind that we are only talking about goods exports. India is a large exporter of services to the US, and that is not in the purview of this particular round of tariffs. We have as much amount of services exported to US as goods exported, if not higher, and therefore we are talking about less than 50% of India's exports to US, and within that, certain sectors getting hit. But this is a time that India could not afford or cannot afford to get hits because we are growing, and we don't want that that to be impacted at this point in time. And the key sectors such as pharma and electronics, which are on a growth path, will get hit with this tariff coming in. And once we lose market share, it's very difficult to get back that market share, even though the tariffs get corrected in future. So those are issues that we need to keep in mind. The impact may be, not just short term, but it'll be at least a medium term impact that will happen.
JJ, there's also mention of a possible 50% tariffs on copper and even a 200% on certain pharmaceutical items to the United States. How realistic is such an escalation, and what could it mean for India's manufacturing and export capacity?
In a way, I'll be happy if there is tariffs on Indian copper because India needs that copper. So I would rather prefer that there is a value addition happening to copper in India rather than raw copper being exported. But yes, ceteris paribus, all things being equal, at the moment, India will definitely get hit with this kind of a tariff. I don't have the numbers in my hand off the cuff in terms of how much copper we are exporting, but it's a critical raw material, and it's something that the US needs desperately. So I'm not sure who gets hit more because if the copper prices for US goes up, so will their EV prices, which is already reeling under the larger tariff rates that they are having to face. And so will be many downstream electrical and electronic industries. So copper is a very critical raw material for many industries and the entire electronic industry. So with the copper tariffs being put in, I don't know who gets hurt more because to me, it's a US industry which will be getting hurt far more than India will be. For India, we will conserve a very, very precious commodity which is needed across many sectors.
Okay, Jayjit Bhattacharya, please stay with us. We're now going to dive a bit deeper into this Truth Social post that Donald Trump posted just under an hour ago. India, Donald Trump, of course, references India as a friend to the United States. We see that relationship which the President of the United States and Prime Minister of India have. However, the President calls these tariffs far too high, among the highest in the world and the most strenuous and obnoxious non-monetary trade barriers of any country. Donald Trump then says that Donald Trump then mentions Russia. I want to just go back to you, Jajit, and just dive into this tweet a bit further. Do you see India and the United States still being so-called friends, especially after this action by the US President Donald Trump? Or do you see this as a new long-term strategy of the United States here?
I think we need to understand what is the definition of friends from a US perspective, because India and US has been friends for a long time. We have seen the 7th Fleet of the US Navy coming into Bay of Bengal, threatening the country. More recently, we have seen the US head of state sitting with Pakistan's military general to have lunch with them right after a very serious conflict which was initiated by Pakistan. And the utterances also seem to be not so aligned to India's interest. So what really does a friend mean from a US perspective? I think that's a definition which will drive whether we are still friends or not. Without having a thought to the disruptive impact that these increased duties will have on India, the US government has gone ahead and put those duties. US and India were supposed to be the first of the bloc to have the trade agreement with US, but there were certain sensitivities and red lines that India could not cross, such as agriculture, which is something that the diplomats and the trade negotiators should understand. The fact that the previous set of negotiations, which was a month and a half earlier, broke down because of insensitivity towards India's red lines from a trade perspective is not very encouraging. We have also seen challenges in terms of procuring the US defense equipment. We have been denied access to maps during the Kargil war, where the fine print was that you cannot use the maps and the location technologies during a conflict. Then why else would a military buy such technology? So from a military perspective, from a geopolitical perspective, from a trade perspective, if US and India does not seem to be aligned, if US is not aligned to India's interest, then I think we need to figure out what other dimension can we be aligned at, which might define these two giant democracies as being friends.
Just finally, is what I wanted to touch on, is of course there's mention of Russia in this post. Here, Donald Trump says that they have always brought the vast majority of their military equipment from Russia, and Russia are the largest buyer of energy along with China. At the same time, when everyone wants Russia to stop the killing in Ukraine. Jajit, there's obviously this deadline that Donald Trump has set, which obviously includes Russia's allies as well, who buy their oil, who buy their military equipment. Should India be worried that if Vladimir Putin doesn't develop on this in this conflict, that Indians could face even higher tariffs here?
Yeah, of course. I think we need to be worried, and everything that Trump has said, he has gone ahead and done it, good or bad, right? He has, in a way, kept his word. Now, having said that, it looks a little hypocritical, because does US also say that they will stop buying uranium the moment if the deadline is not followed by Russia, because they're buying tons of uranium from Russia, and uranium is nothing but energy. So the US is buying energy in the form of uranium. The Europeans are buying energy in the form of natural gas. And India is buying energy in the form of petroleum because we have been pushed out of the rest of the market and we don't have the buying power. Now, all of us are buying energy, but these so-called sanction threats is only for one form of energy and not the other forms of energy is very hypocritical. If US really wants to send a message to Russia, it should say, I'll stop buying uranium for you, I'll cut my nose to spite my face. But that's not what's happening. US is not even threatening Europe or Germany, which is one of the largest buyers of gas from Russia. In fact, the value of that gas is significantly more than the value that Indian oil companies are buying from Russia. So yes, India should be concerned about the threat, but also this is not really a rule-based order that's we are talking about. This is an autocracy in the global world, a hegemony that we are observing. There is no rule that we see in this kind of a conversation.
Yes, Jayajit Bhattacharya, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. We will bring you all updates in regards to that ongoing situation. Now we move on. One of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded had struck